While our nation has been distracted by partisan bickering and gridlock in our government, all across the country, in state capitals and Washington, D.C., policies that promote systemic racism, poverty, militarism, and environmental destruction are threatening our democracy and decaying our national morality. More and more working families are finding it hard to keep pace with the rising cost of housing and health care, even as their wages stagnate. Our most vulnerable children are treated as an afterthought in the feverish effort to provide tax cuts for the wealthy and for corporations. Young DACA recipients are treated as political pawns, and black and brown people are being kept from the polls by a racialized voter suppression law. 50 years ago, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King called for a poor people's campaign to begin a revolution of values in America. He and other leaders invited people of all races and religions to unite against the evils of racism, poverty, and militarism. He reminded us that the government has the power to act, the resources to tap, and the duty to respond to the needs of the poor and disenfranchised. So today, a new Poor People's Campaign is needed to save America's soul. We need a new mobilization of the people in our own time and context to demand that our elected officials focus on the needs of the most vulnerable among us. And see, we know what needs to be done. We know what kinds of policies are necessary to address poverty, militarism, and environmental degradation. What is lacking is the moral imagination and the political will. So today marks our intention to call the nation to a change of course. We join poor people, clergy, and activists in more than 30 state capitals across the United States this morning in a Poor People Campaign, a national call for moral revival, which will reignite the effort to unite the poor, the disenfranchised, the marginalized, to transform our nation's political, economic, and moral structures. You see, this isn't a mere commemoration of the work of Dr. King's and the others 50 years ago. It is the consecration of a new moral movement, a new effort, a new action to transform the political and economic and moral structures of our society. Our campaign aims to build a broad and deep national moral movement rooted in the leadership of poor people and reflecting the great moral teachings to unite our country from the bottom up. We are demanding a change in course. And today, we serve notice that if our voices are not heard and our issues remain unaddressed, we are prepared to take direct action and engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. Yes. Joining me today are several of those powerful people who have joined in that call. Those who are either affected by some of the very policies that hurt those who are poor and disenfranchised, and those who have been on the front lines of organizing and advocating for a change. We have with us Denarius Lewis, an activist with the Minnesota 15 Now campaign, who's been involved in the fight for living wages for future generations in his own community. We have Samantha Selena Sanchez Ibarra, one of our dreamers, who received her status on the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, and she is an activist with the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, MIRAC. And we also have with us a veteran St. Paul education and human service professional and the board member of the St. Paul Promise Neighborhood, Mary Kay Boyd, who's been active in trying to address all of the issues that affect our children. They come in that order.
Hello, my name is Denarius Lewis. I am a local author, motivational speaker, but when I'm not doing that, I am marching with the 15 Now campaign. I'm coming from generational poverty. My mother is currently in her late 50s. She works multiple jobs, 3 to say exact. I'm a person myself. I work 3 jobs. I work overnights as a PCA, 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. When I'm not doing that, I'm a part-time coach with the YMCA for boys and girls. And I'm also an author sitting on multiple board of directors. I am the chair for the development committee of SparkY. I'm on the educational steering committee for NCAD, and I also am with the Brooklyn Center Police Department's joint partnership on the Multicultural Advisory Committee. Wow. With all that I do, I'm 24, and I look at my mother. She is in her late 50s, working 3 jobs, my sisters. They both are collegiately educated, but they also work multiple jobs. We're coming from generational poverty, and if we're ever going to actually overcome generational poverty, we have to at least have that conversation about where we're going to have livable wages. And I have started to stand behind the 15 Now campaign. I've marched with the Black Lives Matter movement. I continue to stand out of my own comfort zone because there's so many people who are living in it, and there's so much discomfort behind that. Living in poverty strickens the education system, it strickens your outlook on your life, and also your self-image. And so as I continue to flourish in life and trying to find prosperity behind it, I am doing so many great things behind the scenes, but I am now standing forward because I believe we have a new generation that wants to be leaders, and we don't have a person in any office that is maybe white to really stand against and stand for injustice that we have here in America. So I'm with the 15 Now campaign. My name is Denarius Lewis. I'm happy and delighted to be here, and I want us to all have a bigger perspective of life because livable wages is great to have it at 15, but we can do better as we continue to prosper. Thank you.
Yes. Amen.
My name is Samantha Selena Sanchez-Ibarra. I'm 18 years old, and I have been in DACA since 2015. Today, I'm here representing MIREC, the Minnesota Immigrants' Rights and Committee. When I was an infant, my mother brought me and my brother here due to the loss that my dad had lost his job in Mexico. My family came to this country to find work just like many other dreamers' families do. And also because my parents couldn't give us the opportunities that they could give us here that they couldn't in Mexico. If we arrived and we moved a lot in this country because of my parents' separation. Coming to the U.S. and trying to live here has been difficult, so you can imagine how hard it's been for my mom and my dad to have left Mexico, the only place they only know. I didn't know I was undocumented until my brother had applied for DACA when it first opened up in 2012. So, which now I can't renew because due to the process that our president has been able to not do anything good for the Dreamers. By March 1st, 1,200 immigrants will lose protection from deportation every day, and my brother and I could be amongst them if Congress doesn't pass a Clean Dream Act. The United States is the only home I've ever known. If I was deported to Mexico, I would feel like if I had a sign over my head that said unauthentic Mexican.
Yes.
Because the United States is the only place I've ever truly known. We are very close and we're a very loving family, and the possibility of me and my brother being separated is the cause of my family's stress, mostly my mom. She is my inspiration, and it is painful to see her worrying that we might be separated from her. This is what I want everyone to know. I want them to know that immigrants are not feeding off the hands of Americans as many things we do. People are quick to label my family and many others as illegal because we're not from this country. We're just human beings, just like everybody else.
Yes.
No piece of paper should be able to determine a person's treatment of another. And third, I want a Clean Dream Act to pass. We should not pass laws that use human being as trades for border winding falls. Thank you.
My name is Mary Kay Boyd. I see this present-day Poor People's Campaign as a tribute to and recognition of the work of Dr. Martin Luther King and others in 1968, 50 years ago. Dr. King spoke then of moving from an era of civil rights to the era of human rights. Amen. Out of the ashes of the movement of 50 years ago rises a national call for moral revival. Those embers have been burning hot as organizing has been continuing and has increased over the past decade. It is very significant that the organizing is by grassroots groups, religious leaders, and others who believe that every child, woman, and man, every human being has a right to justice, education, opportunities, safety, fresh air, clean water, and to be valued. Yes. We must eradicate the notion of a hierarchy of human value.
Yes.
I am especially angry about the school-to-prison pipeline, black and brown boys and men behind bars, when they could and should be educated, employed, and contributing to the stability of their families and communities. Instead, the privatization of prisons has been made into a lucrative industry. Gerrymandering, manipulation, theft, lying, cheating, and misrepresentation by various aspects of the government, systems, companies, and the like are only some of the ways people have been relegated to the place of poverty. It is difficult, if not impossible, for children to concentrate on lessons in school when they may not know where they are going to sleep that night. Worried about their mother, father, working 2 to 4 low-wage jobs without benefits to try to feed and clothe them. It is difficult when well-meaning teachers don't have the time to recognize that a student needs more than a class assignment or reprimand for not getting homework done or suspended from school, or worse, because they expressed their fears and frustrations inappropriately. I find myself in conversations with youth who can't see a way out of poverty and don't have hope, mothers who are doing the best they can but don't see hope, and fathers who feel useless and hopeless. I just talked with a mother on yesterday who said no matter how many jobs she works, she can't even catch up, let alone get out from under the heaviness of being poor. I know there are many efforts in Minnesota working to address racism, poverty, and other systemic wrongs, but I hope they will respond to the call to join the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Yes. The vision of Dr. King is still alive, and the work is yet unfinished. Amen.
We will take some questions if there are any of the reporters who have questions now.
Do you believe that there's anyone, and go ahead and name names if you want, in either party, the Republican or the Democratic Party, either on the state or the national level, that is addressing these issues?
I will say this, and others can, I will say this. If I have found, in my experience in watching it, that if they are addressing it, it is not a high enough of a priority. I know we've talked about these issues for many years. This has been with us. That's why we're having a 50th anniversary of the Poor People's Campaign. Poverty hasn't left us, is not going to go anywhere. But in the last elections, how many politicians, I'll ask you a question with a question, how many politicians talk directly about poverty? How many people lifted up the real issues of day-to-day living, trying to make it, living wages, cost of health care for poor people? So if I won't say that no one hasn't talked about this, they haven't had hearings, they haven't done that. Of course they have. The question is, what are the priorities? Again, on the federal level, what we saw was a real conversation around health care for children, DACA, but guess what? It was so far down on the priority because we had a government that was more interested in taking care of corporations. So the issue is that we want to get our voice in and say, hey, listen, pay attention to the people in your very own communities, the poor people in your very own communities. Listen to them, listen to these demands, and lift it up in priority.
Do you think that the American people, and I understand I'm talking about people who are struggling, I'm talking about other than people who are struggling, are they not as aware of this problem as they need to be, and is that part of your campaign also?
There's always an opportunity for that awareness. One of the things I said in the beginning of this statement was that we have been distracted. And it is easy to distract us. And I think to a certain extent we have politicians who know that. If I distract you with something like this, or if I have this gridlock where we're fighting, we're in a pitched battle on who's going to win the headline for this night, we, as humans, tend to take sides on that. Our goal here is to get so many people involved in direct action, to raise these issues so much that people will start to say, you know, you're right. I haven't had, my wage has stagnated for the last 10 years, or I'm having trouble with healthcare. And we saw that. We saw that when there was talk about taking away the Affordable Care Act. People who had all kinds of ideological beliefs began to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to be affected by this. And I think if we continue to make that case and talk about don't get distracted by the politics or the tweeting or whatever, let's keep our focus on the issues, what is impacting us. And if we, all of us, say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to talk about these issues. We're going to talk about it loudly. And if we don't get your attention that way, we're going to do direct action so that you will pay attention to what we have to say. And I do believe if all of us standing here, all of our communities, all of us get together and continue to say, It should be a priority for us to deal with issues of racism and poverty and environmental degradation and war economy. I think our elected officials will listen. And by the way, we're putting everybody on notice who's going to throw their hat in the ring for 2018 that you got to pay attention to these issues if you have any chance of getting elected.
I write for a publication that addresses attorneys. Do you see a role for advocate attorneys? There are plenty of attorneys out there who are immigration attorneys, who are advocates in other ways. How can they help you?
Certainly, and we'll get your information, but we need them on the front. It was the attorneys who helped us in that first wave of executive orders around deportations. If we did not have the work of the attorneys there, it would have been a very different outcome. Yet we definitely do need those attorneys. I myself have been working with advocates for human rights, their attorneys, because I had to deal with deportations in my own congregation. And so there is a place for all of those kinds of people who are willing to join us. That's going to be part of the work that we're doing, looking out for organizations who want to join in our activity. By the way, we're planning and organizing now in the run-up to the Poor People's Camp, the anniversary in June. But there's going to be weeks of action, and right now we're in the middle of getting anybody, any organization, who wants to join us in that direct action in this Poor People's Campaign, join us. There is plenty of room.
Can you talk a little bit about the notion of the high cost of being poor? A lot of people think, oh, well, you don't make enough to pay income taxes twice this year. Why do you have a dog in this fight, et cetera, et cetera? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there is and just a prime example, I'm glad you asked that question because I just picked up the book a couple of weeks ago where it's called Automating Inequality. And in that book, the author goes through all of the costs that attends to being poor, whether it be, whether anything from going to the Department of Motor Vehicle to get a license or the requirements of how you apply for benefits. If you need to get an ID card, or if you need to get your Social Security card, the fees and costs. And I haven't even gotten to the point where what it costs you to get there, especially if you live in a rural area. If you live in a rural area that doesn't have public transportation and you have to go to the county courthouse between the hours of 1 and 5 on the second Thursday in the month, and you have to be at work. The whole issues around what drove the kinds of relationship between law enforcement and poor people in Ferguson, Missouri. Their court system about what it costs you when you got just a speeding ticket to go to the courthouse. So this is an issue that rarely gets talked about. I think we're talking about it a little bit more, but I would recommend anybody who wants to get even deeply into some of the costs you don't even think about to look at that book, Automating Inequality, because it will tell you exactly just what it costs, and by the way, what we take for granted in living our daily lives.
What are you talking about as far as, if necessary, and I understand you're going to try to do this without that, but nonviolent direct action, civil disobedience, what kind of things do you think are necessary? Are we talking about shutting down freeways? What are we talking about for the various problems that we're addressing now?
So you know what direct action is, and I'm not going to get into anybody's tactics or strategies, but we're working with several different organizations who, by the way, know how to do this. And for those who don't know how to do it, trust me, we will tell you and train you how to do it. But the point is, what do you do when you have your elected representatives unable or unwilling to hear what it is that you have to say? We send letters, we call, we come, and we talk about these issues. And then we have to take the next step. We have to say, I'm going to show you, I'm going to put my body on the line to let you know what is going on with me and in my community and in my life. That's what direct action is all about. To stop business as usual and say, listen, pay attention, because obviously the priorities you have are out of sync with what is actually going on among the people that you represent. And so again, we're not high-priced lobbyists that can buy our way in. We're not we're not the ideological bedfellows that you listen to because that's who makes you comfortable. What we are people who saying the government has the responsibility to respond to the needs of her people. And so if you won't pay attention, if you won't respond to the letters, if you don't respond to our visits, then we will stop business as usual to get your attention.
What do you think about that bill that was introduced last session and got some hearings, but ultimately didn't get a signature from the governor about increasing the penalties for various kinds of what you're talking about?
Oh.
Shutting down.
Yeah. It reveals you the motivation. Someone who doesn't want to hear from the people who have been trying to get their attention. Why would you prevent? I want to ask the question, and I would love to ask that question, but I don't know who wrote that. Why would you prevent the very people you've been saying, come out and vote for me? Come, let me have the privilege of being elected. But oh, by the way, I'm not interested in what you have to say. And by the way, I also have a very little regard for your constitutional right to come and to come to your government for redress of grievances.
Well, let me just, as a devil's advocate, because reporters are often
Yes, go ahead.
argue for the other side, because they will say, that's fine if you want to say what you're saying at the Capitol, at hearings here, or protests on the steps, or protests in the rotunda. But walking out into the middle of a freeway endangers a lot of people, and therefore it shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah. Endangers, I think it more inconveniences people. That's what it is. Even in that hearing, and I remember there was nothing you could point to that said there was a danger. This was a barely concealed, actually I don't think it was barely concealed, it wasn't even concealed.
It wasn't concealed at
It
all.
wasn't concealed. This was an effort to stop calling attention. And I suspect, maybe that, and you may call it conspiratorial, I suspect that some of that was being addressed because they didn't want what exactly was going to happen. They didn't want this kind of thing happening during Super Bowl. But anyway, that's just me just throwing something out there. But I'm just simply saying, we have in this country not only a history, why would they put in our constitutional documents that we have the right to have redress of grievances? We have a right to come before our government and say, these are the things that I'm caring about, or these are things that affect me. And it is a First Amendment right. It's something that we have held sacred all this time. And to me, it sounded like to me, just again, it was just an attempt to stop people from calling attention, especially in Minnesota, by the way. We're supposed to be the progressive bastion. I think this was an attempt to stop people from calling attention to uncomfortable truths about life here in this state. And we're going to be telling a lot of uncomfortable truths in the next few months. Thank you very much.
Marty Moore in Colorado.
Well, very fun. I feel like I see you a lot. Yeah.
I know, it doesn't, and I knew your parents. I was in